Alright, Aeson people, it's going to be a quick video on how to get started with the Aeson A350 as a pilot. I have already some videos on the pilot playlist. However, I feel maybe it's time just to update a new video that just combines two of the essential parts together. For all other details or more specific details, I would recommend, of course, you go and have a look at the existing playlist videos. Okay, so first start, of course, is to get into the A350. Okay, so this is different for the A380 only because at the moment I haven't made the A380's fuselage collision off because of a few collision issues. So if you want to get into the A350's actual fuselage, what you need to do is don't fly through it because you'll fly the plane itself. Just unfly yourself when you're on top of the plane. Okay, and make sure you unfly before you even get into any of the pilot seat, and then go through the cockpit window and you'll be able to get in. Okay, then what you're going to want to do with the A350 specifically is you just walk in and then you'll be able to select where you want to seat. Now the plane is off, so you can expect you need to turn it on. Take a seat in the co-pilot seat. I would advise before you do sit in the co-pilot seat, before I forget, press to sit into the captain seat, press P. This will put your park brakes on, okay, and this will stop the plane from moving when you turn on the engines, because the plane will move on idle. Okay, now what you need to do to start the plane, turn on the battery. Okay, once you've turned on this battery, you're going to then want to go and start the APU. Okay, so the APU is here. Now what will happen is the APU will turn into APU start stage, which is a blue color here. This is not the stage you will need to turn on the engine, by the way. Okay, so some people do commonly forget to press this a second time and will try and wonder why it's not working. So once you've pressed this on, you can go ahead and turn on a few lights. I usually turn on the beacons before turning on the engines and stuff. Okay, you can turn on whatever, depending on your airline or depending on just what you want to do, what procedure is. Okay, now you can turn on the engine. I usually start real world. They start from the engine 2 to engine 1. So I usually turn on engine 2 first. As you can see, engine 2 is on. Then the next one, I will go and I will turn on engine 1 at the same time. And when you turn on the engine 1 and you're happy with everything is on, you turn off the APU. Okay, so we're going to turn on engine 1. Once engine 1 is on, we'll turn off the APU. Now obviously keeping on the APU doesn't have much penalties at the moment, but when fuel, for example, comes into play, you will realize that, of course, having your APU on, wasting fuel, won't be very efficient if you want to do, trips. Okay, so now that the APU, the two engines are on, we're going to turn off the APU. With the APU turned off, we're now going to go straight in to the captain side of things. I'm going to turn on a few lights that I won't be able to turn on, of course, when I, are in the captain side of things. Strobes, let's see here, navigation lights, and for the co-pilot there's just small details here. Just the weight of the plane at the moment, the takeoff speed at the moment is 164 knots, and great. So with that done, you can either jump out the seat and then sit in the co-pilot seat, or you could use the switch duty, okay, which will switch the duty to me. And here we are. So the first thing you want to do before you actually go ahead and move this plane is you want to make sure that you are familiar with the controls. So if you press the number 9 key on your keyboard, you'll be able to see all the controls here. Now the controls in white are actually able for you to change. You can actually change them to a specific key that you want. However, it will not work if you go and change this keybind to one of these purple ones, because these purple keybinds are not changeable. Okay, so I usually advise just leave it as it is, but if you really want to change the keybinds, you can go ahead and change them for the specific control. So this is in the keyboard control side of things, so anything you change here will only affect keyboard mode. Okay, obviously in mouse mode you won't be able to change how you pitch and bank because that's controlled by the mouse. All right, so the only things you can change here is like the throttle again and etc. All right, so with that done and you're familiar with this, it's time for us to start taxiing. Before we taxi, I'd like to set up my euphoria system. So here I'm going to set the speed that I want the plane to maintain when we are in air. So usually my first speed I want the plane to climb at, so that's 200 knots. My landing knots is fine as it is. I don't have to touch it at the moment. My flex takeoff, so if you're not toga on the runway, you can set a flex setting. So I'm going to set flex of 88%. My warm, this is the first percentage you move the engines to just spool the engine, see how it's working, if both engines are spooling at the same time before you move to flex. It's 40%, I like to have that at 35%. So with that confirmed, I'm pretty much done. So now with everything done, just gonna make sure of clear course with the pilot log that everything is fine. I haven't turned on something that I don't know of. Okay, I am going to go and press T, check my trim. My trim's at 0, that's fine. Of course at the moment it doesn't really matter now, but when weight and fuel comes on to play, you will have to figure out your takeoff trim, but at the moment that's not needed because the center of gravity on the plane is in a specific spot for the trim to be at 0. Okay, so the only thing you have left to do now is to turn on your plane or configure your plane for its takeoff setting. And the takeoff setting, of course, is or the flight setting is changed by pressing the number 0, which is in your controls list. Okay, and this will configure your plane ahead of the takeoff. Great. So now that you are configured, you can unlatch the parking brake. You can see our plane starts rolling. You can give it a bit of spool if you need to. Okay, and take some time to just check that your camera flicks back. If it's not flicking back, it means you're not in the right camera mode. Okay, camera mode changing is done with L. Okay, so now that we are sure we're in the right camera mode, we'll continue to taxi. You can find your favorite taxi spot. If you're wondering why this is flickering, I personally have no idea. It must be something to do with the future lightning, because as you can see there's certain spots where it's not flickering, so it has to be something with future lightning, because there is no like flickering strobes on the actual A350. On the A350, I'm not sure what that is, but it has to do with future lightning, so it's actually a Roblox engine issue. It's probably like something there is fighting with shadows or something. So we're taxiing. I am going to watch my taxi speed. Don't want it too quick. Take our turn here. We start the turn here. Now, one last thing. If you find that you do not have more than 30 FPS, so as you can see I've got more than 30 FPS here. If you find that you don't have more than 30 FPS for some reason, maybe you have a potato or whatever, I would advise to look at the minus key here, okay, to toggle the FBW laws. And why that is if you've taken off before, or if you do not have good internet connection, FPS, or maybe Roblox servers very bogged down, you will probably encounter what's known as a oscillating or fugoid movement with the A350 and A380, because the fly-by-wire system relies on your system to be at least running decent internet and running decent FPS. So if you're not doing that, you will encounter what's known as a phugoid issue. Okay, so to mitigate that, if you really do have a PC or internet issue like this, is to change the fly-by-wire mode using the minus key. So in fly-by-wire auto law, it turns off the pitch protection and it turns off the pitch fly-by-wire system, meaning that you have manual direct control of the elevator. This means as well, the downside of this means that you will have to manually trim yourself using the scroll wheel, or you can use the right and left brackets. Okay, and of course it also turns off the ability to use the flare mode landing, which isn't much of an inconvenience because you can manually flare. Okay, it will still keep in this mode the bank protection and the bank fly-by-wire. If you want to completely remove all protections, you would go into fly-by-wire direct law, which removes all the protections. Of course, you still have the store warning, but it will remove all the protections. Okay, and that's just full manual, as it would be real world if, like, all the systems, the computers had a major flaw. You'd go straight into direct law. Okay, so that's pretty much that. I'm gonna go back into normal law because I'm happy with that. So now I'm happy with my plane. I'm gonna go into my mode right now. So with everything right, how I do this is, first, of course, I find my favorite position. My favorite position is usually always here. With that, make sure, okay, again, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go into my warm. Flex. And there we go. Easily do it, don't over pitch yourself. Okay, you'll know when fly-by-wire kicks in when that happens. So fly-by-wire is now kicked in. Safe procedure to gear up now. Positive rate. I'm going to hold my request climb because I'm going to go and switch my system on. 200 knots in. And I will maintain my climb. If I want to turn on my autopilot, I can do that. It will maintain my climb, maintain everything, maintain the speed for me. And that's pretty much it. Alright, and that's pretty much how to set up your plane and take off. Okay, it was up to you to figure out how to land, and there's videos on how to use the Sidara system, etc. And pretty much that's as it is. The plane will literally maintain as best as it can for me the last pitch I set it at and the speed I set it at, okay, as it would do real world. And I can also look at what it's doing with the trim. So at the moment we're at like 0.5 trim, 0.4 trim. So this plane is very well trimmed because the auto trim system does it for you automatically. And whenever I want to take control of this, I just press middle mouse. If I get into any protections, okay, I'm going to force a protection now.
Bank angle.
So if this happens to me, yes, I will press middle mouse button and then I will take control again.